views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to Lyme Talk Radio with Dr. Pat Baccili. Epic healing for an epic life. This inspiring show highlights leading-edge solutions, groundbreaking research, headline topics, and tools for holistic healing and wellness. This hit show is dedicated to raising awareness, promoting advocacy and prevention, and supporting initiatives for optimal health. Dr. Pat is passionate and focused on life-saving results reaching far beyond Lyme disease, providing a forum for powerful stories, heart-opening experiences, and hope-activated solutions. Dr. Pat will shine a light on the many shades of Lyme disease fueled by a body, mind, spirit remedy. Now here's your host, Dr. Pat.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's so great. I was going to say to everybody, welcome to the Dr. Pat show, but yeah, that too. I want to thank all of you for tuning us in and turning us on. And here's what I want to say about this show. For many of you, you have said to me over the years, Pat, you've talked about Lyme disease openly since 2005 and talked about how, especially in parts of the country that I live, don't even want to recognize it. And to this day, just so you know, those parts of the country, Pacific Northwest in particular, is still kicking and screaming as to not to acknowledge that Lyme disease exists here. Many of you have heard my own story about my visit with the CDC, and good news being that I was from the state of New Jersey, and that made it okay for me to request a Lyme disease test. Now, here's what I want to say to everybody out there. Doesn't it sound weird that you're talking about, wait a minute, I've got to request this test? Well, it's way more complicated than I thought about in 2005, and definitely that I even thought about in 2004. But here's why I love doing this and why Lyme Talk Radio is a show that is so important to so many people. I get to talk with folks, as my very special guest today is people that are taking a message that goes beyond hope. It is really about hope in action. It's really about taking a look at what do we know, what can we learn, and what do we want to share with people. Today, for those of you out there, I am so honored and thrilled to have Dr. David Jernigan joining me here today, Beating Lyme Disease. Beating Lyme Disease. This is the book. It's fabulous, by the way. Living the Good Life in Spite of Lyme. And boy, I'm telling you, that is the perfect subtitle for the book. And as a matter of fact, can be a book on its own. Because one of the things that we know and we're learning about is in this second edition, what we're learning about as Dr. David travels the world, internationally recognized leader in the treatment philosophies of biological medicine and treatment of people with chronic illness. There's something that's coming to the forefront and something that we're learning. What we're learning is, in a lot of cases, we don't know what we don't even know. Now, what I love about today's show and a conversation, with Dr. Jernigan, especially as the founder of the Hansen Center for Optimal Health, is that optimal health is not an illusion. It is not an illusion. This is something that needs to have a place in the forefront of our consciousness when we're talking about disease and illness. It is the thing that we look at where we say, wait a minute, can I be different? Can I still have an amazing life? And how do we get that? Well, first of all, we get to say thank you so much to Dr. David for everything that he's done. We get to say thank you for the many ways that, he's not just fighting a good fight, but he's getting out there in the world, kind of like many of us have done. And is saying, we're discovering some new things and we're discovering some old things. And here we are today talking about Lyme disease. And, even with the number of celebrities now that are coming to the forefront, we just cannot get the love right here. David, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Jernigan, thank you for today's show, and thank you for all that you do in this arena. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pat, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your listeners, and I'm geared up and ready to go.
Well, I love to start out with, a question that, has come to me. I've been doing this for about 13 years now. And, the arena that we're in right now is called positive talk. 13 years ago, if you'd have said positive talk to somebody, they'd have said, what? But as we launched Transformation Talk Radio and, Transformation Radio FM, many people have said, why are you doing these kinds of things? Why are you looking at bringing a new level of consciousness in conversations? And I thought it was an interesting question, but I want to ask you the same thing. It's less of a why, but it's more of a what. What is it for you? What is it for you that created the tipping point in your life where you said, I am going to make a difference. I am going to do something that needs to be done, and I could be of service?
Well, it's interesting you would phrase the question that way, because my journey started in the Lyme disease world in the mid-1990s, and I knew what just about every doctor knew at the time. It was a national board test question that said, bullseye rash, what causes the bullseye rash? And that was about all anybody knew about Lyme, was that it was ticks and it was in New England and things like that. But I had a lady that was CDC positive that lived in Kansas, had given birth to twin boys, and they both were born with Lyme disease. And she came to me after the Kansas medical doctors that she went and saw basically proclaimed her cured after, I think, maybe 4 or 5, maybe even 6 weeks of doxycycline. And she goes, we're so not well, and you need to help us, because at that point I was focused on chronic illness only, and had already achieved some level of notoriety at that point, just through word of mouth. We'd had some really good successes on some high-profile cases, and so she had come to me, and she kept pumping me with information about Lyme disease, and I tried everything that was out there, and there wasn't anything. If you remember in the 90s, there wasn't any research hardly that you could find, and so I actually had just to dig and dig and dig and try to figure out a way to help these people. And way back in those days, in the 90s, we would do lab tests to try to help people. Once I started knowing I'm supposed to look for it, because in Kansas, you're not supposed to look for Lyme disease. I mean, it's just not even on our radar.
Right.
And it was interesting. After I developed a protocol for helping people with Lyme disease, I went to a health conference, and I had a booth, and it was beautiful. I had it all done up just right, and had big pictures of ticks and banners and everything. And people would walk by, they'd stop and talk, and they'd go, oh, I'm chronically ill. Nobody can figure out what it is. My doctors say there's just nothing they can do. And I was like, have you thought about Lyme? Oh, no, I don't have Lyme. And they'd keep walking. So it's interesting. I just got back from the Florida conference, ILADS conference. And it was fascinating to me that so many doctors that were lecturing, I don't know how many doctors were there, maybe 1,000, 1,500, somewhere in there, just a huge conference.
Yep.
And I'd say about half the lecturers were talking on natural medicine and how they have to deal with other things more than just antibiotics.
Yep.
So, here we are at the Hansa Center. We're pushing like 10,000 patients seen now in the chronic illness. And, the fascinating thing is the prevalence, according to the CDC, they finally acknowledged at least 300,000 people in the United States alone, but it really is worldwide. And yet most of the doctors, the top doctors in the field, wouldn't be surprised if there were 3 to 6 million more cases just in the United States that are undiagnosed. They have chronic fatigue. They may have chronic headaches. They may have chronic this or that or the other. But actually, if you kept looking, like if you had unlimited resources to keep testing, you would likely find Lyme disease as a component of their illness. May not be the actual thing, but they would actually have it as a component most likely.
Well, and what I love about this conversation is you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, what you have been able to see, and let's talk about a relatively short period of time. That doesn't really mean that this Lyme disease has not existed, because we know we know it does, and we knew it did. For many of us that grew up on the East Coast, right? I mean, part of the conversation was, wait a minute, there's something going on here, and it's not this. If it were this, if it were rheumatoid arthritis, or if it were this or for that, why do we think that the medication is not working on some people and has been working on the other? And so we open up a doorway and we have these conversations, and you're absolutely right about the conference. My colleague, and by the way, my co-host for this show is not here today, Dr. Nushin Darvish. We're talking about places like Kansas, and by the way, let's talk about Seattle and the Pacific Northwest if we could. It's posted on the government's website, the health website, that Lyme disease and the tick doesn't live here. Now, does that shock you a little bit? Like that tick knows not to cross the border into the Pacific Northwest?
Well, they all fall off the migratory birds and animals as they cross the state line, of course.
Well, isn't it hard to believe, and we're going to spend today really looking at many of the things that you've not only put in the book, but that you're talking about, but isn't it really wonderful that we now have ways to communicate through airwaves like this and, through networks and radio shows to bring people information? I want to ask you this question. What do you think the greatest challenge is in the work that you do? What are you seeing? And, what did people at the conference, what are they saying about the greatest challenge we have right now in the message?
Well, I think the biggest message I just blogged about on my blog, which is davidjernigan.blogspot.com, about the most common phrase you'll see on the forums and things like that. And, Lyme disease forums are out there now. Support groups are out there now. Some of these things that, like you say, just a few years ago, there was nobody talking about it hardly. And if there were, it was just one or two support groups.
Yeah.
But the most prevalent question I hear is on those groups, and I see in people, is why am I still not well in spite of doing everything I know to do? I'm taking all the right protocols. I'm taking all the right antibiotics. I'm going to the big name doctor. I'm traveling out of state to try to get it. So why can't I get well?
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting, and this brings up a good point that I wanted to make. I have a good friend that's an MD, PhD, and he said a profound statement to me the other day. He said, Lyme disease is not a true disease, but it's more of a syndrome, and you should actually be calling it Lyme syndrome since it's not truly one cause. Now, this is shocking to some people. What? It is one cause. It's just Borrelia burgdorferi. No, it isn't. And my doctor went on to say, but indeed, Lyme syndrome, let's say, is indeed a tremendous range of symptoms unique to the various weaknesses in that person's body, mind, and spirit who succumb to the illness. Isn't that profound? And that's the big challenge is, yes, we've gotten the message out there that Lyme is all over the country, even though, like you said, there's some states and government bodies that are still fighting over it. They don't want to admit it. Whatever it is, we know the truth. People are getting the truth. And yet, unfortunately, it's like it's not the complete story. I mean, because Lyme, in my book, I talked about how Lyme is like once your body succumbs to it, it seems to rally all the other various latent infections and things that are in your body. It affects the weakest parts of your body. It creates chaos. It reveals the chaos and traumas that have been accumulating throughout our whole life. So that's the challenge, is not just say, okay, you got Borrelia, because it's now understood, and I've watched over the last however many 20 years that I've been doing this, and we all the doctors in the field start chasing another bug. I remember when it was just Borrelia, and everyone ran to figure out how to help the body eliminate this bug. And then they said, no, you also have to do Babesia microti. And then you have to, after that, and it became Ehrlichia is often there, and Rickettsia is often there, and you got to deal with the HHV6 virus that's often there, and the mycoplasma. We all ran, and parasites and yeast, and it's just, And yes, we got some people well doing these things. But in the long run, we missed, or at that point, we were missing very often that it is more of a syndrome. You would not get sick necessarily if you didn't already have the weakness and the traumas and the blockages and things that are in the body that enable disease to be created.
Yeah. We are so afraid, Dr. Jernigan, we're so afraid of the word syndrome, I believe, in the community. I want to just say, for those of you tuning in to Lyme Talk Radio, we want to welcome all of you just popping in right there. And this is a show that we do every week, by the way. And we're going to continue to do today. I am so thrilled that we're talking with Dr. David Jernigan, because Beating Lyme Disease, this is the second edition, Living the Good Life in Spite of Lyme. So much of this you reference in the book, and I want to ask you a question about this, because we have learned a few things along the way. And you said that brilliantly. In 1995, when we're looking at our friends and our family, and they're literally, we're watching what's happening to them, people that were once vibrant, and we scratch our heads. But what's interesting about what you said, Dr. David, is the fact that, in many cases, especially, myself as well, we're okay until we get that surgery. You know what I mean?
Right.
We go in and we get that rotator cuff repaired, or we go in and we get some other kind of surgery, and then 6 months later something happens. Can you talk to this a little bit? Because this seems to be a very common thread that absolutely probably doesn't have any research.
Okay, I'd love to talk about it, because I want to make a point before we go beyond this. Okay. I'm not petitioning to change Lyme disease to a Lyme syndrome. All I'm saying is it's bigger than just one bacteria. And there are many, I wish I had the exact number because I heard it at the conference, how many different strains of Borrelia bacteria there are that they've identified now. Mm-hmm. But more towards your question, like you said, somebody gets a rotator cuff surgery and they're never the same since, or they have a traumatic event in their life that happened, and they're never the same after that. And the reality is that the many traumas in our lives are cumulative. From birth, we are traumatized by chemicals that we breathe in, that we get on our skin with soaps and personal care products that are loaded with toxins. Thinking about the skin, just on a side note, you should never put anything on your skin that you would not eat. That is a toxic substance. It's going to soak into your skin and absorb in higher concentrations than had you swallowed the substance, because your stomach acid would break down a lot of what you swallow. But there's nothing to break it down if you put it on your skin. So, again, from birth, we have chemical traumas, we have emotional traumas, we have physical injuries. The medications that we take are generally illusionary medicine, I call it. It creates the illusion of health, but it creates also with it chaos, more and more disruptions of normal function. When you have a headache and you take a Tylenol, that isn't actually fixing anything. Your headache goes away, but the cause remains. Even if your headache doesn't come back, the cause, what triggered it often it remains. So these are traumas that create, all of these traumas accumulate in your body from birth. Even prior to birth, sometimes if the mother who was pregnant was needing to take a lot of medications, or had done recreational drugs, or had lived a life of high fructose corn syrup and all the different toxins in the world at the time. So all these traumas accumulate and create chaos in our bodies that ultimately lead to disease by whatever name it's given. Okay? I mean, this is the the interesting thing.
Yeah.
Most diseases in medicine are named by a collection of symptoms. Well, Lyme disease, we now know, is kind of like a syphilis-type bacteria. It's a spirochete. And just like syphilis, which was called the great imitator, meaning it could actually imitate a whole lot of other known illnesses. Well, same with Lyme. Same exactly as syphilis. It's depending on where your weakest area is, or maybe collection of weak areas in your body, you're going to have unique symptoms. And it does drive the doctors crazy because, I saw a man who'd had massive headaches for years, but that was his only symptom. And when we helped his body resolve the Lyme, guess what? No more headaches. Well, do you treat everyone with headaches now as if they are a Lyme patient? So most doctors, obviously you wouldn't. But the difference at the Hansa Center is that we restore order from chaos, coherence from incoherence, and harmony from disharmony so that the body can heal itself. That's the pivotal way that we have the successes that we have. It's that and so many innovations that let us do what no one's been able to do before in the way of testing the body.
I love this. May I add something? Because I think that sometimes when I get to speak with folks like you, Dr. David, that are out in the world and doing some amazing things in a very, 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 what some people say, hopeless arena. That's what Lyme disease has been called by many people. But here's what I want to say about, your work and what you've been doing for decades now. There's one thing that's so important, and I just want to say it. You are somebody, and the folks at the center, you are folks that, number one, have kept an open mind and an open heart to consider the fact that Lyme disease exists at many, 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 many levels, and that a different approach may be possible in giving people relief. Now, I know you didn't say that, but I want to acknowledge you a little bit for that.
Well, thank you. I sure appreciate that. And I'm, people, including my own family early on, they were like, if you're going to spend that much money to become a doctor, why not become a real doctor? What they meant was like an MD. And I am so happy that I decided and stayed the course to become a chiropractic physician. Now, people might be shocked. Why is he talking about Lyme disease? Now, number one, chiropractic medicine and the philosophies of natural medicine, natural healing, and thankfully we're in a state of where the statutes, the laws of the state actually say we're licensed to treat every tissue and diagnose any condition using any kind of testing that's available out there, using any natural means. So people are shocked that when I say we've seen only the toughest cases, and that's all we want. When a doctor runs out of ideas for a patient, that's the patient we want. That's where we shine, is to figure out what everyone has been missing so that you can get well. On my blog, I just posted 2 cool stories of seriously wheelchair for 6 years on one case. I don't remember how long for the other one. Walking, not after years and years and years of treatment. Walking where they couldn't walk, talking where they couldn't talk, reading when they couldn't read. They couldn't even carry on a conversation. 6.5 years for this one young lady. This is what the power of when you restore harmony from disharmony and that coherence of the body from that incoherence, and you create order from chaos in the human body, and then you can strategically address how the body handles these microbes. Dis-ease falls away. And not once am I treating Lyme disease. Never did it ever occur to me to put Lyme on somebody's file. Basically to put a name on something is to say, let's do some cookbook doctoring.
Right.
If you have this label, I'm going to give you this protocol.
You just got back from this, one of the, largest conferences, if not the largest in the world. And, I'm not surprised that you heard the conversation and people talk about this. I am so thrilled that, where I live, and this show is actually coming from Rhode Island, but where I live now, we happen to have some of the most incredible natural doctors, chiropractors, I believe, in the world. And, I love that you're talking about, chiropractic care, because we do an entire annual series on the Dr. Pat Show about chiropractic care, what it is and what it isn't, and the history
that's awesome, because
of chiropractic care and how it goes back before medicine. So, for somebody like me, I'm like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, most people are unaware that we are trained the same as an MD,
right,
up to the point to where we all specialize. And so we exceed the medical curriculum in many, many different ways. I think they obviously exceed us in like pharmacology and stuff, but it's fascinating to me because I see an analogy. Like earlier we were talking about how Lyme is not just a bacteria, right? The whole syndrome conversation we just had. Well, chiropractic has done kind of that same education of the community of saying we treat the back and we treat the neck, right? And yet we're trained in every single pathology, in every single way, all the different ologies out there. And, we're called it chiropractic medicine for a reason. We're getting trained in all these ways of adjusting not just the spine, adjusting the chemistry, adjusting the mind, adjusting the energy of the body, facilitating conditions that probably weren't even in a person of ideal function from birth. We all think we're kind of all born equal. Well, we're not born equal. We're born with our own weaknesses built in. And so being able to improve upon even how you were born is just a phenomenal thing. And honestly, Dr. Pat, I'm never sitting around, even with some of the toughest cases on the planet, going, I sure wish I had a pharmaceutical I could use. Now, we're armed to the teeth. I'm like the tool man of alternative medicine. I have like almost 4,000 different remedies in each treatment room. We have 5 doctors in each treatment room. There's like thousands of some of the coolest remedies to help the body actually function at its highest potential, and disease falls away. Not just in the short run. I mean, if you want short run, take some Tylenol.
Yeah. Well, this is when we come back. We're going to go to a quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk specifically about some of the treatments. I want to talk about some of the things you talk about in the book. And honestly, we could have done about a 4-hour show here. And next time when you come back, we'll actually do a video presentation. But one of the things I want to talk about is I want to really hear from you, and so do our listeners, about what are some of these treatments? Why is it that many of you emailed the bleep out of me when I started to talk about ozonating my water? You said to me, what are you doing? Yeah, but I'm telling you, Dr. Jernigan's got a ton of things we're going to talk about when we come back. We're going to talk about everything from the Perfect 7 treatment, detox, and how to get your body in optimal health, as we like to say, bada bing, bada bang. We'll be right back.
Are you ready for a radical shift in your way of being? Are you seeking a more deeply connected and fulfilling life? Awakened Living Radio is a show dedicated to helping you embrace a life filled with profound peace, connection, and happiness. TJ Woodward is passionate about helping you find your clarity, balance, and purpose. Join co-host TJ Woodward and Dr. Pat Baccili on the first Monday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific Time for Awakened Living Radio on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Tune in to Sheer Alchemy with Leslie Fontaine on TransformationTalkRadio.com and get ready to stir up your passions, remove your blocks, and shift into an entirely new existence. Speaker, teacher, channel, clairvoyant, Leslie Fontaine is a transformation catalyst who channels a powerful energy from source to catapult listeners into living the life they were born to live. Whether it's shifting from scarcity to abundance, from emotional pain into joy, or from illness into health, Leslie will help you step into the true essence and power of all that you are with the help of the Ascended Masters and Archangels. You will not be the same. Visit TransformationTalkRadio.com for show dates and times and LeslieFontaine.com to say yes to explosive abundance.
1230 WBLQ.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. And wow, thank you, Brian, for playing Olivia Newton-John for those of you out there. As a matter of fact, we did a series of interviews with her when she was building her fabulous cancer center in Australia and building a center that was based on holistic philosophies. And, you know, it so ties into what we're talking about here today with Dr. Jernigan. Everything in his book, I mean, I just want to say this about the book for those of you just tuning in. Beating Lyme Disease, 2nd edition. And we're going to make sure you have information about the website and how to find out more about the center, how to get your copy of the book. But what I love about the book is as you read this, you get to check things off and say, whoa, now body temperature, oh my gosh, my body temperature doesn't get up above 97 degrees. Why is this in the book? Well, we're going to find out about that and much more. Dr. Jernigan, before we kind of get going here, can you make sure we tell folks how to get a copy of the book? And then also a little bit about the website and the center so folks can find out more about that.
Okay. I do believe the book is still on Amazon, so you can find it under Beating Lyme Disease. 2nd edition, not 1st edition. This is the latest 2nd edition. You know how Amazon is. It's the older books that are out of print cost like $1,000. Don't buy that one. Just buy, you can get an ebook, or you can get the hardback, or you can get the paperback. Maybe the easiest way to get it, though, is by going to our website. We have a web store, a store on our website. How's that? And the website is hansacenter.com. That's H as in Harry, A, N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, A, Center, CENTER.com. And you can see, like you said, the Perfect 7 protocol and my book. And the thing that's interesting, it's likely your listeners are listening because they've been sick for a long time. Unfortunately, the way of life, it seems that we all generally only seek deeper knowledge when what we've been trying isn't working. And, you know, that's kind of the topic of my latest blog post that I talked about earlier on davidjernigan.blogspot.com is how that, why aren't you well? I've been taking Dr. Jernigan's Perfect 7 protocol. I've been taking all the other big name protocols. It's worked for everyone else, and it's not working for me maybe, or it hasn't worked completely, and I want complete health. We all want that, right? So, you know, in my latest blog post, I do discuss how that the sicker you are and the more that resistance you are to treatment from your mainstream doctors that you started with and even some of the protocols, the less likely that a canned protocol will work for you. It doesn't mean they won't. If you switch from one that isn't working, you might just be blessed and find one that does work. But the people that come to the Hansa Center are shocked very often. I hear them say, well, I thought you were just going to put me on the Perfect 7 protocol. And I'm like, no, a canned protocol, basically, you know, a one-size-fits-all protocol is what doctors strive to do when you cannot get to their clinic. But most, as you know, Dr. Pat, most of the big-name natural doctors that are out there, they don't do what their protocol says. I mean, their protocol is made for just to try to cover at least this much. Do at least this and see if you can get well. And so, but when you go to their clinic, man, everything that we do is tailored to the unique chaos, to continue that earlier discussion, to harmonize their body, to restore the absolute perfect optimum health, that integrity of the body, and facilitate the body's ability to rapidly heal. Like, I had a lady get mad at me one time, Doc, you're gonna find this funny. I gave her a remedy as she laid on the table, just said, this is this homeopathic remedy, let's say, under your tongue. I put the lid on, and my timing mechanism a lot of the time is just the time it takes me to put the lid back on the bottle and set it down and turn back around to the patient. I said, how does your symptom feel now? Well, she got so upset with me. She was angry. She goes, if you think my symptom is just going to go away that fast, then that just tells me you don't know anything about my illness, because we are a chronic illness facility. We're not a Lyme facility. We see tons of it because I've written 4 books on the topic, but it's like we see everything that no one can figure out, okay? And so this wasn't a Lyme case, but she was so upset, and it took me a while to explain. When you can really specifically, strategically find that silver bullet through our unique testing that we developed here at the Hansa Center, very often I've seen just miraculous things that defy science, just miraculous things. And wouldn't you want a doctor that's looking for you to feel better that quickly? But we can get it often enough that it's like, yes, we do practice with that in mind. We're bummed out if you don't have something that's better in every single office visit at the Hansa Center. It's really amazing way to work here. And contrast that to what, let's say, even my own wife, who before we got married, she had Lyme disease, and her medical doctor was a big-named LLMD. For those of you that are listening that don't know what that means, that's Lyme literate medical doctor. So for that region, she went to that big-name doctor, and he seriously told her to, on the very first visit, he said, you have Lyme disease, here's your lab test, it shows you have it, and he said, expect to feel horrible for the next 5 to 8 years, after which you might start feeling better. And I'm like, boy, talk about setting the bar as low as you can go, where this doctor didn't have to perform anything. But to his credit, he was doing what mainstream medicine does. They treat numbers on a lab test. And they teach the patient to follow numbers on a lab test and say, wow, you're getting better. And the patient goes, yeah, but I feel like I'm dying. Well, but the lab test says you're getting better, so keep going. Well, that's not how I wanted to practice. I mean, the sign of good treatment is that you feel better.
Yeah.
Not artificially better. Like I say, illusionary medicine, taking an antihistamine for an allergy instead of fixing the reason that you're having the allergy, or taking something to mop up the toxins but not really teaching you how you're getting the toxins in the first place.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the Perfect 7 protocol, I want you to understand it is just like every other protocol. It's my idea after years and years and years, and people, the toughest cases out there, I was like kind of going, okay, now I don't know if you're a 100-pound person or a 300-pound person. I don't know if you're a completely toxic, loaded, soda drinking, NutraSweet consuming, GMO eating person, or if you're like this pristine, raised on organic food your whole life. So that's kind of the reality of a protocol. It's made to be well tolerated and hopefully work for everyone.
What I love about this conversation is that, first of all, there is the recognition, and your book is really amazing. And I don't know if you heard me say this when we came back. is I was completely fascinated by some of the things you talk about. And let's just talk about a couple of them if we could. First off, I was like, oh my gosh, he's talking about low body temperature.
One of my faves.
Nobody's talking about it.
I know. I feel like I was the voice in the wilderness, like so many things, But low body temperature, it's very often, a lot of your listeners, if you polled them all that are listening, they would say, well, that's your thyroid.
Right.
And a lot of their doctors would completely agree. Now, I'm not saying that your thyroid can't be a problem, but again, it's not the complete answer. Because the thyroid's like the idle on your engine. If you rev your engine, obviously your engine's going to get hotter. And if your idle set too low, then you're going to be all sluggish and you're going to gain weight, right? We all get that. And you're going to be low body temperature. So yes, there is a plague of thyroid problems on the planet, but it's not the complete answer. And when you can start really getting down deeper into the thermostat and resetting the body's thermostat, then you can actually get long-term healing. It's like if I gave you the perfect remedy, the perfect collection of remedies, let's say, or let's just say you're a medical doctor, had the perfect medicine, and yet your lymphatic system and your blood was sluggish because your core temperature was so cold, well, you can't deliver it to the body. The body can't get it in there. I mean, when you look at the imaging, the special imaging of the blood, it looks like the water system for your city. There's some movement in the main water lines, but when it comes off the main, nothing's getting through. Nothing's coming through to your faucet. Right. In that analogy, your faucet might be your liver. Maybe it's your brain. You're trying to get something up there to work, but it's like that's how bad low body temperature is. Fibromyalgia, again, the hardening and stiffening up of the muscles. You can rub it, but it's just going to hurt like crazy, right? It's just going to come back because the underlying problem is still there, because once you get down and you're sedentary because you can't exercise and you right. feel horrible, everything begins to solidify. Right. And it's like a water molecule. Now, picture like a water molecule in your mind's eye. All you listeners out there, think of like an H2O, molecule. And it's rocking, what we call oscillating back and forth. Well, if you increase the oscillatory rate of that water molecule, it turns into a vapor, gas, steam. So that's what heat does. Well, if you slow down the oscillatory rate of that water molecule and it's just barely moving, it would turn into ice. So think of your human body. It's supposed to work at an ideal temperature. Everything outside of that, everyone has experienced a fever. It's not very pleasant. Well, how about hypothermia? Well, that's what I see on these chronically ill individuals all the time. Is like, on some of them, their legs are already dead practically. They got the pitting edema in their legs. They have no circulation getting down there. I measured the temperature on one lady, and I think it was like 86 in her legs. Wow. And you're just like going, oh, my gosh, no wonder I can't get any remedies to work down there. Right. And so it's an incredible realization as a doctor to see this and say, hey, this is part of, it's not the whole answer, but it's part of what I need to be doing if I plan on restoring this person's body to health. Yeah. And it's easy to do. You should just take a temperature. Let me tell your readers about this. Yeah, because this is really the question. What I love what you're saying, and my gosh, what a graphic explanation that you have of this. And, you touched upon something really, really, that I think is serious, is that you walk into a doctor, you tell them my body temperature runs 97 all the time. If it gets to 98, I'm probably got a fever. And they're like, oh, everybody's runs that low. No, not everybody's runs that low. And it's not because you live in a part of the country. Does it make sense when we hear people say,
listen, you've got to drink more oxygenated water. You've got to exercise more. You've got to move your heart. I mean, these are the things we hear. Is any or all of that true?
Well, yes. It's true that you should drink more oxygenated water, let's say, or you should be able to use an infrared sauna, hopefully a broad-spectrum infrared sauna.
Yeah.
My problem is that people that have just enough money for one thing or for treatment, let's say, they go and invest a lot of money in things that don't stand a lot of chance many times of working until you also address the thermostat of the body. Because you can raise the temperature, again, with a sauna. Okay? You can get in a hot bathtub and raise the temperature, but it doesn't change the thermostat. As a matter of fact, when you get out of a bathtub, your body goes, I'm too hot. And it starts kicking in all the processes of the body to try to cool you down again. And very often it's just like you're left in a much hotter condition. When I studied anthroposophical medicine in Germany and spent time in hospitals in Switzerland, like the Filder Clinic, it's interesting because they do bath therapies with essential oils and different things diffused into the bathtub, but the water is about body temperature. It's interesting because if you get in body temperature water, it actually kind of feels cold. We're so spoiled for hot.
Right.
Measuring the temperature. If you think about it, if it feels warm, it's warmer than your body temperature, which should be 98, let's say. 98.6 is the generally accepted temperature. So you're already pretty much well over 100 by the time you really feel a hot bath. And the body's going, instead of saying, hey, this is warm, I'm going to stay warm after this, it goes, this is hot, I'm going to cool you down after this. So you're cold to start with, and you're going to be cold again after that. So very often the body, because it's been cold, is very toxic, very, very poisoned. Inside the cells they're showing now is cellular debris that the cell cannot get rid of by itself. And so that's where it's just like you really need to fire up the engine of the body, if you will, by restoring the integrity of everything on every office visit. This brings me to a point that I'm very passionate about. Many doctors, especially for the people with chronic illness where nobody can figure them out, so they go to all these clinics all over the place, they'll go, well, let's treat your adrenals for a while and see how you do.
Yeah.
Or let's treat your gut for a while and see how you do. Or let's put you on this diet for a while and see how you do. Or maybe they do a combination of it. They'll say, let's treat your adrenals, your gut, and your diet for a while and see how you do. Well, it's great for what it is, but it's what I call pieces and parts doctoring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, we've developed testing here at the Hansa Center where we can turn on every single circuit in your body in one visit. And every visit you're here for 2 weeks, an hour a day you're with the doctor, and at the end of every visit, the doctor is making sure that every organ and every tissue is up and running correctly. And maintain that so that the body can start kicking out the toxins. Yes, you can use a sauna. Yes, you can do ozonated water and things like that. All those are great because you got to sometimes help the body kick out the toxins. But you see what I mean? It's just like the cellular machinery has to be fixed.
Exactly. And that is really the point that I think we're making here today. I mean, left to our own devices, we're out there and we take, one from column A and one from column B. But I think what you have said in the book and what you're doing at the center is so important. This is something that has to really be looked at from a complete body, mind, spirit perspective. And not in 1 or 2 visits, or not in the way that many, many people are being treated. And that's what I hear you say. What we are really combating here, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but this is what I want to say. We're combating the information airwaves, media, journals
agree.
That write
Where do you turn when everybody says they have the best?
Have the best. But even this, you're going to be shocked about this, and I'm going to send it to you. there was an article in Science News, the magazine of the Society for Science and the Public, in August of 2015. This is a reminder, Dr. David, of how much more work we have to do. And the article is titled 5 Reasons to Not Totally Panic About Ticks and Lyme Disease. And the article goes on to talk about, and folks, you can go ahead and read it yourselves. But the old image of the United States and where Lyme disease resides, with the Northeast covered and no other place, right, in the country, that's in there. The things that say there's no need to get the tick tested for diseases is in there. Lyme disease is generally easy to treat. I'm reading you the article, Dr. David. And here's number 5. There are a few good ways to prevent tick bites. Now, having said that, couple minutes left. What is our next step? What's the message that we'd like to leave embedded? Because, for us, we are doing a fundraising campaign to keep this show on air and shows like it, so that perhaps someone like you can have your own show, because we are constantly battling messages like this science article that makes me a little bit crazy.
I know. And it's funny because it's the same where people say you should open multiple Hansa centers all over the world, and I still wouldn't be able to help everyone that needs help.
I know.
And it's that same thing. It's just like reader beware. Like we're all familiar with the buyer beware.
Yeah.
But reader beware. Just because somebody has big credentials behind their name, to me, I'm almost more likely to want to shun that doctor because of the big credentials, because it's like our politicians right now. You always wonder who's pulling their strings. What lobbyist is behind them. And it's kind of that way, unfortunately, in medicine, where it's just like the research depends on who's pulling their strings to put this out there. Because you and I know this is absolutely incorrect. Many, 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 many doctors know that this is incorrect. And yet, so when you guys that are listening are out there on the internet and you're looking at different medical research, just be aware that sometimes it's a bench researcher. They don't actually see real patients. And even if they did see real patients, they don't have the knowledge or the training or the tools that they need to do more than antibiotics. I mean, it's so simplistic. Antibiotics are so simplistic, and yet they, too, in my opinion, add to the chaos of the body. They add to the disharmony. They add to the breakdown and the ultimate creation of disease very often. They're not doing anything to restore that. And you might go, well, aren't they restoring the body through killing the bacteria? And I'm like, there are 10 times more bacteria in your body than there are cells in your body. Now think about that. That's like 1.5 quadrillion bacteria. And you might say, well, but Dr. Jernigan, those are mostly friendly. Well, yeah, mostly. But you know that there's research out there that was done, and it was published in the Bulletin of the Academy of Medicine. I know you don't have much time, so I'll be quick.
We got about 60 seconds here.
Okay, they reported research where they gave volunteers test tubes to swallow of cholera bacteria, and it required extremely high concentrations, up to 100 billion cholera bacteria before any of the volunteers would get sick, until they neutralized the stomach acid. What does that mean? They took a Tums and gave them the cholera bacteria and found out it only took half as much bacteria to create cholera. So just having cholera, you got to get a ton of it, and even then you got to screw up the body by weakening the stomach acid as just one way to ensure that you're going to get a disease. Wow. So create a situation, sour the milk for the infections and the disease, and correct all the chaos in the body, and that's what we strive to do at the Hansa Center. And I would encourage any of your listeners that have any kind of condition, not just Lyme, but just anything that no one can figure out, give us a call. Go to our website, hansacenter.com. That's HANSA Center.com, or Google my name. I have hundreds of articles on the internet. So,
wow. Thank you so much, Dr. David. And believe me, we're getting the word out there. Wow. Thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on. My gosh, beating Lyme disease. Wow. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Lyme Talk Radio with Dr. Pat Baccili, Epic Healing for an Epic Life. This inspiring show highlights leading-edge solutions, groundbreaking research, headline topics, and tools for holistic healing and wellness. This hit show is dedicated to raising awareness, promoting advocacy and prevention, and supporting initiatives for optimal health. Dr. Pat is passionate and focused on life-saving results reaching far beyond Lyme disease, providing a forum for powerful stories, heart-opening experiences, and hope-activated solutions. Dr. Pat will shine a light on the many shades of Lyme disease fueled by a body-mind-spirit remedy. For more information, visit LymeTalkRadio.com and tune in next time.